if it's too hot, I'll probably pass the hell out when it's too humid.
Well, I mean, I was in New York City the last 6 years, and like New York City summer hot is so sticky and gross in
Yeah.
like you feel the heat just radiating from the concrete and you're just packed with people constantly, which is a very different experience than being in a bit more like open space and
Uh,
maybe a little ocean breeze. Like that's different.
yeah. It always felt like where I grew up in the Midwest in Oklahoma, when I would see that just off the pavement, I was like, oh my gosh, those. I'd call them, tell my grandpa, I'm like, they're microwaves. Like, I was like, that must be what it's like. It's so hot out there.
Uh,
Well, first, thank you so much for doing this. And this is just an opportunity. I'll give you a little bit of the housekeeping. So we're just going to have an open dialogue conversation, get to know who you are, what you do, your purpose, and what we can do to really spotlight you as what you're looking to do as far as making impact in people's lives and in leadership, and kind of how you and I connected. So just straight off the top, housekeeping, just keep it light. We'll dig in, just we're going to let the conversation go.
okay.
It's not one of those things I found that if I put too much of a construction to it, then like I've always interviewed candidates, then I lose, somehow my bias creeps in. And I just like to keep a really open space of how we talk through and your purpose.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. I love what you're
Yeah,
doing. Yeah.
yeah. So let's go ahead and just start out. Your name, spell your name, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah. Well, I'm Chris
Those aren't
Rollins.
hard questions, are they?
I'm Chris Rollins. It's really great to be here. Uh, the way that I'll introduce myself is through my essence words, which I think will lead to an interesting conversation as we go through this around leadership and how I work with my clients. So my essence words as a human being to get to know me as a person are compassion, intimacy, love, joy, and peace. And so those words to me capture like my being and my essence and who I am as a person. So that is a brief introduction by way of a few words that I think represent who I am. My work is really focused around leadership and executive coaching
Mm,
with corporate leaders. My background is in both sales, account management, but most recently in organizational development, where I was leading
mm,
people and culture for a company in New York City. And through that work, I loved spending time with people one on one, coaching them and helping them develop as leaders.
mhm,
And so that's what I'm focused on now is supporting leaders to really show up
mm.
with purpose, finding their voice, finding their authentic style, and to lead from a place of love and not from a place of fear. So I'll pause there and we can dig more into that.
Yeah. Well, so you say essence, and I want to
Yeah.
get to that a little bit
Yeah.
and how that might if there's a differentiator between essence and what is your value. To me, there's some similarities but some differences in it. And
Yeah.
then, but go ahead and but for to start out, tell me a little bit about tell our audience and those that are listening what you do now. Your business, your consulting. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I pretty much all of my business is one-on-one coaching with corporate leaders. So who I work with is kind of varies, but I have a pretty distinct focus on working with folks in the people and talent space. So I have a handful of clients who are heads of people.
Mm-hmm.
My passion there is as a former head of people, I know what it's like when you're showing up for everyone else and no one is showing up for you. You are the person doing the most for everyone in your organization, and you're looking around to say, where the heck is my support and my
Right.
love? And I
Right.
think we saw that in
Where's my
20.
resource?
Yeah, exactly. we saw in 2020 that I think was a huge need was community for folks who are leading people teams,
Mm-hmm.
which I think really exploded online communities of people,
Yeah.
leaders, to really connect with each other and support one another.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been a really fulfilling to give back and support to heads of people who are doing this amazing work to create, brave, diverse, inclusive organizations, and are just responsible for so much. So that's one group of folks I really love working with and really
Mm-hmm.
resonate with. And as an openly gay person too, I love supporting the LGBTQ plus community, leaders who are looking to find their authentic voice and their place in the corporate world. And so a lot of my coaching is really about developing leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And my philosophy and approach is that there's so much out there about what it means to be a good leader, and the traits you need to have, and
Mm-hmm.
the models of leadership that you can follow, or the 6-step plan to become a great leader.
Mm-hmm.
And my philosophy really is, forget about what's expected in terms of a leader, and
Mm-hmm.
let's focus on who you are as a leader and what makes you a great leader, and bring more of who you are to the table. Because it's very
Mm-hmm.
easy to look around and say, oh, that's a really good leader. I want to be like
Yeah.
that person. That person seems really confident. I want to be like
Yeah.
that person. And suddenly you're like losing yourself, right? And
Yeah.
so recentering and focusing on what makes you an amazing person, amazing leader, and
Yeah.
bringing more of that to the table.
I like how because you specifically illustrate how what we do is like, look at these 12 traits. Look how I did it. And then what happens is we end up attaching to that, and then thus losing the essence. Maybe not losing, but maybe compromising on the essence of who we are.
Yeah.
And so I think that attachment disorder, which is evidenced from largely within the LGBT community space, because we suffer a psychology of what is our community being rejected and abandoned.
Yeah.
So we attach to what is there instead of focusing on, instead of who we are, our truth, because we haven't been nurtured to do that.
Yeah. And I think it's easy sometimes to take for granted, the like for me, my everyone has their own journey of coming out and what that
Mm-hmm.
experience is like in the corporate space. And I know I've been guilty sometimes of having been through that journey and getting to a place where I feel pretty comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
that I almost forget that it's still not easy for people, right?
Right.
There's still so many people, especially, who are later in their careers, who either still haven't come out, or still haven't like had the been on that journey to really feel
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in the corporate space. And
Right.
continue to have conversations with people like that. And that's why it's just so rewarding to empower them to
Mm-hmm.
create, to tap into how that identity makes them a great leader, and how that part
Mm-hmm.
of them is really important to how they show up.
Yeah. Because we coming out's kind of that's just the first step in that marginalization space. The other hurdle that we have to overcome is then balancing or gauging where the spectrum of inclusion is and where we fit in that and how authentic we can be in that space.
Yeah.
And so we're out, but then it becomes um, what's the next step? How do we now thrive? And you're bridging that. You are connecting from that space of from what is visible to into the full inclusion. Like we're visible, but now let's start helping one on one in how we can thrive in the inclusion space.
Yeah, what's been really validating and interesting to me is, and encouraging, is that as a coach, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
businesses and corporations bring in outside coaches to support their senior leaders. And what I'm hearing more of now is, really thinking about who are the coaches that they're bringing in, and does the roster of coaches reflect the representation of the people in their business?
Yeah.
And I was talking to someone recently who said, we work with a roster of 6 amazing top-notch coaches. They're all women, and most of them are white. And that's not providing the level of support that I think is needed at these businesses. When you're talking about an individual's like challenges and struggles and growth as a leader, you want to be able to connect with someone who can resonate with your experience. And so what I'm finding is this opportunity to work with corporations to support their underrepresented leaders, particularly for me and my passion around working with the LGBTQ plus community. Is like, this is a great opportunity to invest in your talent and to show that you appreciate them, to as a retention move, right? And an obvious place to look there is ERGs and like business resource group leaders who often are taking on that work just out of the goodness of their heart and are not getting paid for it. So providing them with leadership development through like coaching, for example, is just a really powerful way to show, like, to put your money where your mouth is, right?
Exactly. Taking that time to invest in, if you're going to support diversity and inclusion, then you need to invest in the inclusion piece. So a couple of things I want to talk about, if it's okay, 2 of what you talked with your essence.
Yeah.
The essence of who you are, where you come from, as far as in your work. And you mentioned 2 things that aren't said a lot in corporate America, or are not said a lot in leadership coaching. You said intimacy, and you said love.
I know.
You said love.
Yeah.
And as this last year, we, if the one person or one organization that's going to stand up and say, well, 2020 didn't affect me. I'm like, well, then I don't even know how to respond to that, because there's a willful, ignorant delusion there. We were all in some way affected by this, on a certain spectrum level, one way or another. But in that last year and everything, it became a little more evident to me, and that's how you and I connected, was this idea, and there was a lot of talk now. It seemed like there was a reset button on how we could start talking about culture now. People were now talking more about culture and the future of HR, and everybody, 2020 HR was just in survival mode. In a lot of ways, they still are in the survival mode from the residual of 2020. Yeah. And that's probably going to go on for the next couple of years. And so we're seeing that. So what we see from last year and everything, and you and I got introduced to, because I was getting with some networking groups, getting back in with my consulting. And someone mentioned, like, you might want to connect with somebody who is starting to base a lot of their consulting on more mindfulness-based approaches. And I appreciated the fact that you were a fellow LGBTQ member, because I was having trouble finding anybody who was open to discussing their leadership consulting and coaching based on a solid foundation of a mindfulness-based approach. And that's how you and I connected, because that was the only thing that was making sense to me in all of my education, my tenured career in human resources, talent acquisition, leadership and development. The only thing that resonated in any sort of development was the start of this mindfulness-based approach of how we separate ego from the rest of from that leadership space, and like, how do we move forward in that? And last year we were all slapped with a big dose of ego. But when we connected, you had those same qualities, that essence that I was looking for in other colleagues, that weren't afraid to that was not afraid to talk about the things that we just don't talk about in HR, in talent acquisition, because it becomes too much a lot of times of a step-by-step process. So I say all that because I want to hear more about you using the essence of yours of intimacy and love. How that's working with you, how you're using that, and what's coming back to you with that.
The first thing that comes to mind that I want to share is that this work that I've done to have this awareness into myself in a way that I feel like affirmed in my being of compassion and intimacy and love and joy and peace. That's work that I've done in the time that I've been building my business and since I left the corporate space. So let me just caveat this by saying that all of this is sort of in response to the challenge that I was having embracing these qualities of myself when I was in the corporate space. And so I was having this experience of like wanting more love in the workplace, more intimacy in the workplace, and feeling scared to lean into that because it felt like it didn't have the right place. And how do I even express that? And
can I pause you 1 second?
Yeah.
Was the fear of that feeling the possibility of it seeming as weak?
Like
the corporate
okay. And weak and like misplaced and what's the point? And
perhaps too effeminate for
male. I mean, I didn't even think about it even as like femininity or masculinity as much as like this corporate focus on results and KPIs and bottom line. And I was very fortunate to have people that I was reporting to for most of my career that made me that I was comfortable like being myself with and could be vulnerable with. But there was always still this sense of like, there's a corporate structure and you're reporting to this person, and how much of myself can I really like bring and share? So I'll give you an example. So at one point when I was meeting a new boss that I was going to be reporting to me, that's an opportunity to connect with another person on a really like human, deep level to get to know the person that you're now entering this really important relationship with. And so I'm coming from this place of like wanting to be intimate in the way that like, I want to get to know you. I want to have like open doors for connection and create something that's going to establish a powerful relationship going forward. So that's the place I was coming from. And the first, question she asked me was like, so tell me what your team does and what they're responsible for. And I was like, oh, we can talk about that. I'd love to first just kind of get to know you a little bit more, share you a bit, tell you a bit more about my background, and just like kind of get to know each other. And that to me, it was reinforcing this feeling of like, where's the space for the intimacy and love to show up in this moment? And I cultivated that because I didn't just go along with her narrative. I stopped and said, well, let's have a bit more of a conversation here first. But it's moments like that where bringing more like heart into your work, I think is really important and really powerful because we are all people and we just want to connect, and we have to get the work done, but we're talking about an important relationship here that has to be built on trust and connection and safety, and that stuff can't exist without intimacy and love, in my opinion.
Right. Have you ever said to anyone, like, what has been some of the reactions when you have said with some clients or whatever, like, love approach thing, like, how do you use it?
I will, like,
because people they're scared shitless of that word.
I know. And I, it's taken time for me to kind of embrace that too. I'll sign some of my emails with love, like to some of my clients, right? Like I'm bringing love into the space with you. I like really feel like your heart, and I feel my heart in this, and that's important. And it's like other people's stuff if they feel uncomfortable with that. Like that's
Yeah.
just me being true to my being. And
Mm-hmm.
it's part of putting out in the universe what I want to create and when I get back.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, how are you finding on the reactions of HR because I'm just curious because whenever, a lot of times when you do talk about, I think HR leaders in
Mhm.
general, I think they're already being intimate
Hmm.
with people by knowing a large majority of their confidential information. I think that's intimacy. And I think there's a lot that we could learn uh, from this generation that's fixing to retire out of the corporate leadership world. And I'll just kind of say it there's a lot of antiquated leadership that's still there. And so with that, but it's always kind of been this very strict approach that like don't get too close to people. uh you know you can't talk about certain things, we can't say love, we're not here to build friendships, relationships, we're just here to manage people, HR, keep the company out of legal situations, keep them out of hot water. We're only here to recruit. We're not here to make friends. And I've been in these executive meetings and board meetings and been involved where it's been, well, we can't cross certain lines.
Right. Right.
But no one's ever really been able to define for me what that line is. So how are you how are you having that kind of that conversation with people of how they can then have those conversations within the workplace?
Well, it starts with them as leaders to understand how they're showing up or not showing up in that way with the people that they're immediately working with. So I have one client, for example, um, you know, who was hesitant to even work with a coach because it it was an investment in her
Mm-hmm.
that you know she wasn't even seeing herself as a leader or someone who was like worthy of the investment, right? And so she pitched it to her
Mm-hmm.
CEO as like, I'm going to work with the coach and I'm going to figure out all the best ways to have the best one-on-ones and how to have good feedback
Mm-hmm.
and how to have tough conversations, and I'm going to bring all those tools back to the organization, and it's going to be very tactical. And after 2 sessions with this person, uh, it was like this aha moment of like, holy shit, this is not about like tactical things. This is about me as a leader and how
Mm-hmm.
my leadership is impacting the entire company.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like when you actually open yourself to transformation and
Mm-hmm.
looking inward to say, how am I showing up and what impact is that having with other people?
Mm-hmm.
Then you start to really get into this powerful territory
Mm-hmm.
um, of really seeing how you can connect with other people and be more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And and so it's not natural or easy for anyone. And my essence words are my essence words, and everyone has their own essence.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about honoring that and finding ways to bring more of their essence into the space.
Mm-hmm.
But you also can't like force heart and love into an organization that just isn't ready for it, and that has
No.
leadership that isn't open to it. That's
Mm-hmm.
uh you know I some people are fighters, some people are lovers, and some people
Mm-hmm.
are going to stay and fight and try to bring heart into that organization for as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
um and others are not, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But you have to know the place, I think.
Yeah. Which people are calling, what is now is loyalty. There are these now huge loyalty rewards for people staying through the pandemic, and we're in a mass resignation.
Yeah.
People are leaving, and I think a lot of it has to do with what you're talking about. Is that we aren't talking and being about these things that create better connections from leader to people. We're not talking about the things of, where trauma plays a part in of someone's personal trauma plays a part in how their performance is at work. Instead of discovering it is, we'll get them out of here.
Yeah.
We're not getting down to this intimacy, which means getting down to the wounding of a lot of these situations in people.
Yeah, I
So
think
it's, yeah,
yeah.
but we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
We just don't talk about it.
I think what I want to offer there is just sort of a reflection on myself and my experience being ahead of people, noticing that in scenarios I was sort of holding back who I was, wanting to be more like self-expressed in many ways and be this like heart forward, heart driven leader in organization, which I do think that like was a lot of the impact that I had. But you have, if it's not there, then you create it, right? And as soon as you see someone else doing it, it's like, oh my gosh, you like exists, this is a thing, right? Like you look at Claude Silver, right? Like she's chief heart officer of VaynerMedia, and it's like she talks about leading with heart and with love, and it's a big organization. And Gary Vee's huge brand, really, and it's like, okay, well, did I really need to see like Claude doing this in order for me to feel okay doing this myself, right? Like, so it's an invitation for anyone to, and that's what this is all about, is to lean into who you are and what you want to bring into your space. And it's so powerful when you do that and just create it, even if it doesn't exist.
Why do you think companies aren't supporting the evidence of heart-led leadership? I mean, if Harvard, where do we begin on the data? Google, and there's the research and data suggests, and all the studies that come back to show that this type of leadership, led by trusting your people, leading with heart, the alignment of heart, mind, all those things, everything that suggests that that's the best. That's the best the best outcomes you could have from that type of leadership.
Well, I think
Why? What's the fear?
I think time will tell as people start to prioritize the experience that they want to have in their work, because it's becoming so tied to what it means to be alive and to be fulfilled, that the leaders who do show up in the way that really cares for and respects their people are going to be the leaders that build really successful companies and attract the talent that is going to help them get to the next level. And it's, I talked to some people about, coaching work together, and they're like, well, is this going to be like therapy? And, it's like, as soon as there's talk of emotion, it feels like, oh, we're getting into it's like, oh, this is there. I don't want to go there. Like, we can't talk about emotions. So that's a piece of it too, I think, is that people are afraid that, opening themselves up a little bit to like the emotional vulnerability is it's a very scary place. And the funny thing is, it's often those people, that very resistance to even opening a conversation is probably what's getting in the way of their leadership in the first place.
It's like clogging it. It's like they can't get all that toxicity out and be able to speak their truth. That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough to do. So when you have, I would say, at what wit's end is someone at, I'll say, because typically if I have a client that comes to me, they're at the point where it's like, we're hurting. We have a wound. We need some fixing, something like that. What is typically the emotional state of a client that once they come to you? What's kind of been typical?
I mean, it's pretty varied depending on the individual person. I do talk a lot with people about imposter syndrome, feeling like they're not enough and feeling like they're going to be found out, that they don't know what the heck they're doing, and they just magically were placed in this role and actually don't have the skills. which is a feeling that a lot of people suffer from, myself included. I've been there.
A lot
Um,
of people, especially in our community.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Um, and a lot of it also is conversation with people in our community of like how I'm out, but I'm not like really out, and I haven't really like embraced it. I don't really, sort of
Mm-hmm.
shy away from conversations with my boss, but I'm sort of more open with these people, and just exploring how to like tap into your essence, who you are as a person,
Mm-hmm.
and how you want your leadership voice to sound, and how you want to be showing up as a leader in your organization. Um, so, I know some of the work that you do is sort of looking more at an organization and the culture and where they are. And I love
Mm-hmm.
your analogy of the wounds and the different like
Mm-hmm.
phases or levels there. Um, on the individual level, working with the leader, um, it's more about, you know, where do you see yourself going? What's
Mm-hmm.
the vision? What's the path? Where are you now? And what's the stuff that's getting in the way? And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the stuff that's getting in the way can be the stuff like the imposter syndrome, or I'm not sure how my like identity really fits in here, how to bring that into the space. Fear of like failure, making a big career move and not sure what that's going to mean for
Mm-hmm.
me. There's a lot of stuff that goes on.
Yeah, the imposter phenomenon is it's a huge thing for our community, that we're battling through every day. Because we're a moral dilemma. We can't deny that the argument ranks up for us with our rights, ranks up there with abortion. There's a moral dilemma with it. And typically a lot of times, statistically, is we are from more communities, schools, areas that are marginalized, that we don't have a lot of acceptance. And so this whole idea that of the wrongness does become an imposter once we do get the opportunities where we feel we have reached this societal success, right? Then it becomes, can I even do it? Am I doing it? Am I doing it right? Because what my fear always was, I was always thinking, oh, it I have to overcome being who I am. I have to cover. I have to act a certain way because I have to stay in alignment, because the world says I I should be grateful for this, right?
Yeah.
And so that imposter phenomenon for me would kick in. And
Yeah.
that stress, that anxiety, that fear of termination, if I were to ask or say the wrong thing, or if I were to suggest something that was not in agreement with everyone else, but I felt was a more correct method of doing something. And that imposter syndrome, then for me, I had to go back further and just like, where's it coming from?
Mm.
So I would be curious to know how do you help your clients kind of work through that, because that is therapy. So how do
Well,
you do that? Because I know you're not a therapist. I know you're a career guide, specific to this niche, and our community. But how do you kind of help guide from that? Because that's a huge piece to tackle. Uh, to then be able to answer, this is the kind of leader I want to be.
yeah. The first thing I'll say to that is this is why it's so important to have representation and leadership, because the last company I worked for, the moment I stepped foot in that door, well, not the moment, but I had learned that there was an openly gay person on the executive team, and I
Mm.
like noticed that they had a really great relationship with the CEO, and like suddenly I felt really okay about being who I was, because like, oh, it's okay at the most senior level and there's nothing wrong, and he's very well respected. So whew, like signal says I'm good, like, and that's not an experience everyone has, and
uh-uh.
that's sad. which is why my work to help leaders really like develop into who they are and find their voice and really embrace that is so important, especially at the senior level. But to your question about specifically people experiencing this feelings of being an imposter, it is definitely very different for each person. And what's underneath that definitely varies depending on the person's experience and what, like how they learned to believe that. One of the things that comes up frequently is this like need to be an expert, or this feeling like I have to be an expert in a topic. And if I don't feel like I'm an expert, then I feel like I'm an imposter. So part of that's like redefining what does an expert mean to you? How do you think about being an expert? What's a different way to define what it means to be an expert at your company? You know, what makes you as the head of people a really valuable contribution to this company? And it's actually very common in like HR senior people roles, because we are expected to know everything. There is so much going on in the business. You're touching everything and you have to know everything. That's the expectation, but the truth is that just can't be. So it's helping people, one, instead of looking outward, to look around and say, this person is so confident and they're like a senior vice president. If only I had that title, or if only I could embody their confidence, then I would feel better about who I was.
Yeah.
And the problem is you're comparing what you're seeing on the outside from someone else with what you're feeling on the inside, when in fact that person is also probably has or is also experiencing the same exact feelings that you are. And to that point, when I was on the executive team at my last company, I went and got drinks with our head of product after a long day, and we're just kind of getting to know each other. And we talked about being an imposter. And she said that to me, and I said, there's no way. Like, you are the most like put together badass, like you got to be kidding me. She's like, I feel that way all the time. And I was like, I feel that way all the time. Like, what? And suddenly we had this connection.
That's a great moment.
And it felt really good to know that another person in the room like was feeling the same way as I was. And I had suddenly a partner and someone who was on my team, and we could support each other. And so, I always encourage people to share that stuff, right? And because you never know what other people are experiencing on the inside.
That would be an interesting thing for organizations to really be able to do, is have something to create a space where they could, who here feels like an imposter? How many people would raise their hands? Because the number of luncheons, conferences I've been to where every icebreaker, get to know you, was always in some way it was a resume build. It was just somebody, well, I've done this and this and this and this. And, I've come to know, not always, I've come to know that in people work, it is completely okay for me to say, I don't know, but I am fucking fascinated by the complexities of a human. And I am willing to do whatever I can to learn and access knowledge wherever I can to create a space to make it better for that human to thrive.
Yeah, I love that.
I find that fascinating. But every time, it just seemed like in these luncheons or something, it was just like, well, how are you doing the 5-step this? Are you doing this? And if you're not creating flexibility for your organizations, if you don't have a flex work schedule, all these things, then you're just not thriving. And I was like, well, how does that apply to the assembly worker? Like all these things, and it just seemed like they're all huge pieces to the larger puzzle. Every one of these things could play a part unique to the organization and unique to the individual. But you're right. I want to expand on this a little bit. Like, where the imposter syndrome, that has a lot to do with we are expected, you and I as people leaders, practitioners now, is and consultants, we are expected to know everything, the law, that we're like the break before it gets to a legal situation, and we better be prepared.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that in your profession? How did you prepare? What was a day in the life like for you?
Yeah, for the most part, I had really good support, like
Mm-hmm.
my purview in my role was, talent management, leadership development, like pretty much everything that covers people and culture, but not HR policy or like benefits or finance. I
Mm-hmm.
was sort of involved in that a little bit, but we
Right.
had sort of separated out.
I always kind of call that the HR admin side. Like,
Yeah, and our
yeah, yeah.
team did a really great
Not
job.
to downplay it, but I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
no. Yeah, and like, that was not my area of expertise at
No.
all. And I
Mm-hmm.
like my CEO knew that when he brought me on to lead the team. Like that
Mm-hmm.
clearly wasn't as important to him. Um, when leadership changed, like that also changed, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that then became, well, as I look ahead and my interest in developing this side of my skills is not there. And so
Mm-hmm.
if that's the path that is ahead for me, then that's not the place that I want to be
Mm-hmm.
focusing my time and energy. But for the time that I was there and had that responsibility, I, I would part of me would just pretend, right? Just being honest, like I would you
Mm-hmm.
sort of fake it and then figure it out, like go and research and find the answers and come back
Yeah.
and
Fake it till
figure
you
it out.
make it.
And other times, I would tap into other experts. I would,
Mm-hmm.
have employment law, contacts that I could get in touch with, or
Mm-hmm.
the online people community is a really robust and amazing community that's very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
So tapping into those networks
Mm-hmm.
is something I encourage all people leaders to do because people really are willing to help.
Yeah, there are resources out there. I tell my clients like there's no sense in reinventing the wheel nowadays. Like there is ton of shit out there and resources
Yeah.
for you to tap in. Just, settle into your essence, gain the knowledge. It is out there. How would you approach, let's say if you had a conflict, what was your conflict resolution like with a manager or a leader that just did not see eye to eye? What was your conflict resolution?
I would all there's one example that comes to mind of an employee that was like a problem employee, a challenging employee, behavioral challenges.
Mm,
And my approach to that is there's always something underneath that. This person is not a difficult person. Like I do not assign that, like I do not have a fixed mindset about who that person is. There's something that underneath
mm,
what's showing up
mm-hmm,
that I need to uncover and discover. And for
mm-hmm,
that one
mm-hmm,
example, it turned out that she's just been at the company for so long and she was so burned out and so like disillusioned that she just like didn't care. And so
mm-hmm,
like the real problem was helping her actually connect more with responsibilities and a job that was going to excite her again. And that was
mm-hmm,
the thing that was getting in the way of her being the kind of colleague that people would expect from her, right?
mm-hmm.
So I could have not spent the time, the several meetings to like get to the root of that and just forced slapped punishments and pip
Right.
all that stuff and forced her out.
Yeah.
Or we could have had the open, honest conversation about what's
Mm-hmm.
really going on here. What do you really want? Are you really happy here? What's going to excite you? But you have to create trust in order for people to feel
Mm-hmm.
safe to have that conversation. And that's something that takes time. And
Yeah.
you have to prove that you're able to do that.
Have you always been pretty comfortable, confident with conflict resolution going into those?
Oh gosh, no.
No.
uh, I mean, I'm a very calm person, so my like energy, I think, really helps that those kinds of situations.
Yeah,
I'm
you
able.
have a very calming spirit. I always enjoy when I'm about to call or get on the phone with Chris. I'm like, oh, I get to call Chris.
Yeah, people have always told me that throughout my career and life. So yeah, there's just a calmness that I think I bring to those conversations that makes it a little bit more easy, but I actually hate conflict. It's like I'm a pleaser. I like to please people. So that's sort of my saboteur that gets in the
Mm-hmm.
way for me sometimes. Um, but yeah, I guess it's different navigating conflict for someone else versus the conflict that you're in for yourself,
Mm,
right?
that's for
Um,
sure.
there's a lot more like heaviness and emotional attachment to
Yeah.
something that you're directly involved with versus seeing something from the outside perspective, trying to get to what's like underneath all of that
Mm-hmm.
and creating a space to have a breakthrough moment. Um, yeah, but a lot of it's emotional, right? That's why we have to talk about this stuff because
Well,
there's emotions.
and there's a lot of work that you have to do on yourself. And there, I have I have a career executive coach who certainly has, you got to be able to do the work myself. And she's very honest with me, which is what I appreciate. Like, I don't know if I like hate or love conflict. I think I've just learned how to work with it healthier ways as I go along in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's definitely one to be able to help me through um, uh, the things that I lost track. I lost my train of thought. What was
Conflict and
conflict?
yeah.
And so she's really able to help me kind of see things in a way where it helps me settle in better to how I approach people in those conflicting situations, as I instead of trying to react or and just respond in healthier ways. But she gives me those things to understand, like how to settle into it. And it sounds like what are some of the daily practices that you do on yourself to kind of know, because you're going to handle some conflicting situations, but how did you uh what are your daily practices that you do to kind of help those? Because if you hate them, that's one thing, but the conflict, but what are you doing daily to help keep Chris calm?
Well, I wish I could say I meditate every day for 10 minutes and I do yoga and all that stuff, but I'm not consistent in the way that I would probably like to be.
I think that's the
Um,
new resume people are doing now. It's like, I read 2 books a day and I
right.
meditate for 30 minutes. And it's like,
Yeah,
every
just
day?
yeah, I'm not going to make that up. What does keep me grounded is having a really good routine in the mornings.
Mm,
I feel my best when um, I'm waking up, I'm having my cup of coffee, I'm going to the gym, I'm spending the time that I need to kind of read the news and read my newsletters and get ready for the day. And that grounds me and gets me in a good place for my day. But I'm not in like my work right now isn't so heavily focused on working with two people in conflict and trying to manage that. It's working with one person and conflict that they may have, with someone else, or a conflict that they're dealing with internally that I'm helping them get clarity around. Um, but the calmness, I think, helps people ease into a space where they feel comfortable
mm-hmm.
really kind of opening up, which allows you to get to the root of the problem.
Yeah. And just that conversation that you had with that employee, if there was a way to measure how much in that time, that space right there in that conversation where you allowed that person to release that whole imposter feeling, anxiety, whatever, in that space right there, to just say, to talk them through it, allow, that's a money saver. That is a money saver for an organization. Instead of going through the stress, anxiety, the performance improvement plans and everything, and that right there speaks of how you can what you're putting the value back into that relationship and the value back into that leader to be a
Yeah.
better employee, leader, whatever the situation could be.
I have, it was just a belief of mine
Mm-hmm.
that you have to do what's best for the person, and what's best for the person is ultimately best for the business.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is one of my guiding philosophies as a people leader. And how that shows up is a really valued employee comes to you and says they want to resign, or they have another job opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and a business minded fear-based, protect the bottom line approach is we got to keep this person, we got to sell them on it, we got to convince them that we're the best opportunity for them.
Mm-hmm.
And my approach is, tell me more about this opportunity. It sounds really exciting. Like, how, really understand it and empower them to make a really clear choice about what's best for them. Because I'm not going to be the one that's going to tell them what to do. If I'm the one that tells them what to do and tells them to stay, and then they're like miserable, then there's resentment. It's just not good,
No.
So it's just good people stuff. Like, just be good people.
I like that. It's just good people stuff. So so one of the stories is I have, so Nico, who is my production manager, I have had 2 situations where I have resigned, and my senior leader was just so upset, like month's notice, didn't leave anything undone, great, but just so upset. And I just remember thinking, why are you taking this so personally? Like, why? That was my first thought. Like, why are you taking this so personally? And so I took that. And then when I had my staffing and recruiting franchise, Nico was one of my recruiters. This is several years ago. And I think about after 8 or 9 months of him working, I mean, great job. All of my team did an incredible job. And they aligned to what I taught from, which was people first. They would put, people first. And I think it was probably 8 or 9 months in, he ended up going on a trip with a friend over to Italy. Never been outside the country, I don't think. But definitely one of the first of kind of the trips like this that he's taken. And so he's very excited. And it was around December, Christmas, holiday season. And he got back, and for probably about a week to 2 weeks, he was not performing the same. Not in the sense that he wasn't doing his job. There was a slumpness in his shoulders. When he would come there. He would just kind of look miserable. And I just, I thought, I'm just going to sit here and talk with him. And I knew what it was up. And I was like, I know, because I travel. I was like, I know he went and got the travel bug. And so I don't think leaders use that emotional intelligence enough at that point. And I was just like, oh, I've been there. I've been there.
Yeah.
And so I had him. I said, toward the end of the day, I think we had a couple of beers in the office, and I said, hey, talk to me. I go, I think you got the travel bug. He was just like, oh my gosh. So he's like telling me all about it. And I just told him, I said, listen, if you're not happy here, I am not going to force you here. If you want to go see the world, go see the world. And he started looking at English language programs and stuff. And I totally support him. Ended up like working for me, like probably about another 6 months. But I even, anything that he needed, if he needed to go do his passport stuff, it's like, I wanted to support him in that. And I took that with all the individuals that I've always worked with. But we have a tendency that we keep this huge attachment that if we let go, we're losing all control and all power. Yeah. And it does not provide value back into the relationship at all.
Yeah. That mindset of like protecting your assets, protecting your people, keeping them, scarcity, right? Versus like abundance, provide,
right?
And
it boomerangs back. I mean, it goes. I mean, here he traveled the world 2-3 years later, and working as the production manager, and keeps my ego in check. Let me tell you, he's making comments right now on the other side of the studio wall. But it just goes to say, like, it comes back to you. Yeah. It comes back to you. So why not try providing some of that intimacy and love into the essence of of some leadership, adopting some of your essence. But
Yeah.
I think that's incredible. So I kind of want to start, what time we got here? Let's see. How long have we been doing this?
Almost at the top of the hour.
Oh, well, let's finish this out. And this, if it goes a little bit, goes a little bit. Are you okay on time?
That's okay. Yep.
So the future of HR is, I wouldn't even know. Chaos doesn't even seem to grasp what the landscape looks like. Every day I see diversity inclusion officers that I'm connected with posting entry-level positions that are open just so they can get some of their followers and influencers to see it. Because so I'm like, okay, now diversity and inclusion officers and executives are being pulled into helping out with the recruiting effort. No one is escaping so far this whole idea of what is happening in these mass resignations and people leaving, the rise of gig economy, workforce, all of it.
Yeah.
And as the future of HR is progressing, more people are coming to this woke state with the leadership, language, and development that you are providing. We're getting more into the psychology. We're getting more into the scope of humanity. I'm reading, the book right now, Humanocracy. Being able to declutter the issues surrounding bureaucracies. So we understand there's also, and because systemic racism and all these things that have been systems that we always knew were there, but now they're just becoming more evidence. And it's taken some time to, declutter all that. But as the future of the scope of HR for the future, and as you're seeing it, I think you are on the forefront when it comes to the understanding of where it's going. But what advice can you give? What can you provide us as far as what you're seeing as the future of human resources and people leadership?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I think my wish and my hope and my advice really for CEOs is to take a step back and look at this landscape and realize that your heads of people are one of the most important, if not the most important person in your organization in terms of, and this has always been the case, but especially now with how quickly things are changing, that the responsibilities and the burden that falls on your head of people is so tremendous. And I think CEOs are looking as an unlimited resource that can just do everything. And so in terms of investing in your business and setting yourself up for success and managing with this crazy changing landscape, invest in your heads of people and make sure that they have the support that they need. Because talking about the great migration or whatever, the resignation, heads of people are also people that are looking for other jobs too. And that that's a big hole in your organization. So I would look out for number one, first and foremost.
And also making sure that not investing in your mid-level managers who are also in a smaller fashion heads of people.
They've always been underserved, under-resourced in a big way. Yeah.
You've been here the longest, you get the job. No leadership development.
Yeah, exactly.
Good luck.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how do people get connected with you, and what are some new projects, some things that you're working on? You have will you tell them about QueeHR?
Yeah.
So you can QueeHR.
That's right. You can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Rollins. You can Google Chris Rollins Coaching. You can connect with me. LinkedIn's probably the best way to connect with me. I lead a monthly group that I call QueeHR, QueeHR, which is a really beautifully diverse, growing community of mostly LGBTQ plus folks that are in the HR talent people space, and also allies are welcome. And once a month, we have an hour long, what I call a mindful meetup. So as someone who's never really loved traditional networking, it's all online, and we start with a guided meditation that I lead for about 10 minutes or so to just like ease everyone into the space and to really create an environment where people feel a little bit more like comfortable connecting, and it's not intense, and it's not like give us your pitch in 30 seconds.
Right.
It's more about easing into it and feeling comfortable, and then providing the space for people to support one another through, hey, I have this project at work that I've never really done before. I'm not sure how to approach this. Has anyone done this? What advice do you have? And I want to celebrate this thing that just happened last week. I haven't really had a space to do that, and just giving them a space to do that. So it's just a space to connect and network on a deeper level. We don't really talk about, oh, what's my job title, what my responsibilities and my background. It's just connecting on a deeper level to create support specifically for LGBTQ plus folks in the people space as a kind of niche focus. Because as an openly gay head of people, I sort of looked around and said, where are all my other queer people? So I decided to create that space.
I love it. I think it's a nice representation to be involved with those groups, and it not feeling so, just like you said, give us your pitch. I always feel so threatened. I always feel like I don't know my pitch. Can you just get to know me first? Like,
exactly.
I can give you my pitch, but I don't feel it's like gonna give you who and the essence of who I am. I love that. So okay, did you say website? Is there a website?
It's chrisrollins.me. chrisrollins.me is my website. You can find a link to the community that I just described on my website. And I have all of that stuff also posted on my LinkedIn.
Okay, sounds good. Chris, thank you. Thank you for what you are doing in being a pioneer for our community, in helping us craft our authentic voice and our authentic essence in how we move forward in leadership. Because we're coming up. We're moving into the spaces of executive and leadership opportunities. And thank you for being a guide for so many of those individuals in our community that certainly need to know how they can avoid disconnect from imposter syndrome and just be their authentic leader just as they are.
Thanks.
You're a badass, man. You're a badass.
Are you open to me acknowledging you?
Go ahead. No one's ever acknowledged. I mean, people acknowledge me. It's hard not to acknowledge me. Like, I'm here.
Cool. So yeah, I want to acknowledge you for your leadership. I mean, creating something like a podcast and bringing voices on the show and putting it out in the world and making yourself be seen it's really leadership, and that's takes a lot of courage. So I acknowledge you for how you're showing up and really making your voice be heard and creating something that's vulnerable, and I love that. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. You're badass.
All right.
I'm going to be calling you, and let's get some people to a meditation. You know what we need to plan before we cut off here? And I'm going. So my cousin, she does Reiki, energy work. Her and her son, my other cousin, and she has been dying for me. And if the listeners want to hear this, maybe we'll get some reaction. But her and her Reiki coach, I have been dying to take people a leadership retreat out to this place where they beat on this drum circle, like it's a big drum in the middle of the mountains in Colorado, and there's meditation, and there could be some gummies. I don't know, but it's just, I was like, I've died. I was thinking about you. I was like, we have got to do one of these retreats at some point, because people just to get a release and be able to get with other like-minded leaders. So more to come on that.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. You take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.